Hi everyone, welcome to the Christ Pearls channel. This is Jessica, and I got this from my husband earlier today. He sent me this news about how Trump was proposing that the United States should take over the Gaza Strip and rebuild it to stabilize the Middle East. And I wanted to do a bigger video about this because I actually have a ton of stuff on signs of the times that I think pertain to these things that we're seeing in the Middle East, this being just one of many. But it's been a really busy day and kind of a busy week, so I'm going to leave you with a few things to think about, and then maybe when I can get back to it, I will try to come back to this topic. But the signs of the times that I was thinking about are these wars and rumors of wars. Obviously, this is one of them, one of those rumors of wars pertaining to a current war. Peace being taken from the earth. These are ongoing signs of the times. And these pretty much started from the time that, like, the Salt Lake Temple was dedicated and the 4 destroying angels went out into the world, according to Wilford Woodruff. And, the wars started with the Civil War that Joseph Smith prophesied, like it says in the Doctrine and Covenants. And so these are kind of like ongoing signs of the times. There's this other one that's kind of ongoing, but it does seem to have an end time fulfillment. And it's Jerusalem will be a cup of trembling to those who attempt to fight against it. So this is both fulfilled and being fulfilled. And you can read up on this by looking at Luke chapters 21 through 24, Zechariah chapter 12, and also Doctrine and Covenants 138. And then in David J. Ridge's book, 100 Signs of the Times, he had just noted like the 6-Day War as kind of like an example of what this might look like as it's being manifested. And I think we can see that what's been happening ever since October 7th is another example of that 1967 war. And we're seeing Jerusalem, and we're seeing this idea of a cup of trembling. And if you're not familiar with what this idea is, I want to show you. So if you go to your Gospel Library app and you just look up cup of trembling, there's 2 main scriptures that this comes from. One is 2 Nephi, chapter 8, verses 17 through 20. And it's very much the same as Isaiah 51, 17 through 23. They're basically the same. So, this is the Isaiah chapters of Nephi. So in Nephi it just says, "Awake, awake, stand up, O Jerusalem, which has drunk at the hand of the Lord the cup of his fury. Thou hast drunken the dregs out of the cup of trembling run out, and none to guide her among all the sons she hath brought forth. Neither that taketh her by the hand of all the sons she hath brought up. These 2 sons are come unto thee, who shall be sorry for thee, thy desolation and destruction, and the famine and the sword, and by whom shall I comfort thee? Thy sons have fainted, save these 2. They lie at the head of all the streets, as a wild bull in a net. They are full of the fury of the Lord, the rebuke of thy God." And so Isaiah pretty much says the same thing. This is about the last days. Obviously, the Lord, he comforts Zion as he's gathering Israel. And the redeemed will come to Zion in joy, even during these difficult times. And this is kind of like the themes of the chapter that are noted in the chapter header. And it pretty much says the same thing in Isaiah. Those next few verses says, "Therefore hear now this, thou afflicted and drunken, but not with wine. Thus saith thy Lord the Lord, and thy God that pleadeth the cause of his people. Behold, I have taken out of thine hand the cup of trembling, even the dregs of the cup of my fury. Thou shalt no more drink it again. But I will put it into the hand of them that afflict thee, which have said to thy soul, Bow down, that we may go over. And thou hast laid thy body as the ground, and as the street to them that went over." And If you kind of look this up just in the Institute manuals, you'll see some commentary there. There's not a ton, but the commentary that is there is important. It links to several ideas. So, for example, here on this Book of Mormon teacher manual commentary, it basically just says, what would the Jews be living without? They're living without anyone to guide them. And then in verses 21 to 23, what does the Lord promise to do for his people? Well, he promises to take their suffering, the cup of trembling, the dregs of the cup of his fury, and put it on their persecutors. And this is part of several signs of the times. This very much pertains to the prophecies about Jerusalem and the things that are supposed to happen according to the prophecies prior to the second coming. And this could be a very long deep dive video. I'm going to try to keep this really super short, so I'm not going to go into all of it. I'll try to come back to it. But the reason that I wanted to bring it up is because I think it's just food for thought. I think that it helps us see that there are some prophecies in the Holy Land that appear to be starting to come to pass in ways that I think we've all just kind of been told for generations that something's supposed to happen, and it does seem to be unfolding. Now, it could take a while. I don't know how long it's going to take for all of these things to come to pass. But according to Doctrine and Covenants, and this is one of those scriptures that pertains to this, that links up to this, the Lord says, "For I am no respecter of persons, and will that all men shall know that the day speedily cometh. The hour is not yet, but is nigh at hand, when peace shall be taken from the earth, and the devil shall have power over his own dominion. And also the Lord shall have power over his saints, and shall reign in their midst, and shall come down in judgment upon Idumea," or the world. "Search these commandments, for they are true and faithful, and the prophecies and promises which are in them shall all be fulfilled. What I, the Lord, have spoken, I have spoken, and I excuse not myself. And though the heavens and the earth pass away, my word shall not pass away, but shall all be fulfilled. Whether by mine own voice or by the voice of my servants, it is the same." And this actually links up to the two prophets. And the reason why is because it talks about these two sons. It says, "Thy sons have fainted. They lie at the head of all the streets as a wild bull in a net." And there's just linkage here because we can see that John the Revelator is pulling from Isaiah and also from Zechariah for these prophecies that he uses. So like the imagery that he's using that's symbolic and that's telling this great apocalypse, he's pulling from these classical prophets. Like the difference between, or at least the main difference between these classical prophets, and when I say classical, I mean like Isaiah, Zechariah, Ezekiel, Malachi. John is pulling from these Old Testament prophets, but he pulls from Daniel as well. And Daniel is also a classical prophet. And the main difference in the structures, the writing style, what's happening here is that classical prophets are prophesying, usually events to come. Some of these come shortly. They're also seeing things in the past. They're seers, but mostly they prophesy things in Israel's future. And what ends up happening with these is that their prophecies become allegories. The way that they're writing, the structures, the literary devices that they're using, specifically with Isaiah, you can see that he's trying to pull from Israel's past to help modern day Israel, latter day Israel, understand what they need to be aware of, what happened to Israel in the past anciently. The way that Satan got hold of the hearts of the people anciently is still a risk in the latter days. And even though we won't have institutional apostasy or another great apostasy where the keys are no longer in operation on the earth, we are still at risk of personal apostasy. Just refer back to Elder Bednar's conference talk in 2024 October. He specifically talked about this. And I did a whole video on it. It was a really great talk. But you can see here that this is all building up to what Zechariah prophesies. If you look at Zechariah 12, 1 through 3, this is where there's that final great war where all nations will be engaged at Jerusalem. But the Lord, he'll defend his people. That's his promise to them. So for a long time, they were, feeling that cup of trembling. This was a covenant curse that had come upon them. But then in the end time, the Lord, when he goes to gather his people again for the last time, as prophesied in the time of the restored church, the restored gospel on the earth with keys and the fullness, then he's going to be defending his people. And this will cause at some point a great siege that is prophesied on Jerusalem. And this is what leads to that great gathering of Judah that's prophesied. If you look at your Doctrines of the Gospel Student Manual, Lesson 36 on the Second Coming, you'll see that framework where there's these key appearances of Jesus Christ, and this Mount of Olives experience, from everything I've ever found, has always been viewed as a literal experience that is supposed to happen there. And I can't even really find any prophetic commentary where they're talking about this figuratively. Like, this is something that even Neil A. Maxwell, I have quotes from him on this too that I've done videos on before. They all see this as like the Lord is going to appear there, and this is a turning point in the great gathering of Israel. And these are some of those things that are described that build up to this point. And I feel like we're seeing a build up now. I don't know how long it can take. I mean, it's been going on for a long time. So let's be realistic, because look at how long it took from the 1800s just to 1948 for Israel to become a state. And then there's the 1967 war. And as time goes on, you can see that there's this hastening and this compression of events. But I don't know how long that takes. I'm just pointing out the fact that there are things happening there that appear to be part of this buildup that kind of like climaxes in a great gathering. And I had done a video recently. It was the third video in a Latter-day David series where it was all Holy Land prophecies. And I went through a ton of Holy Land prophecies literally right out of the end sign. And there's quite a few, and the majority of the signs of the times that I can see in David J. Ridge's book, 100 Signs of the Times, are fulfilled or being fulfilled. And the ones that aren't, they mostly are centered on the Holy Land and the part of the gathering of Israel that takes place there. And, I know that there's people who just always want to look at it figuratively and always want to think that, that it's already done or it's happening. But I just have to tell you that I disagree with that. I think that there are some very literal prophecies that are probably the most clear of all of them. Like, to me, they're more clear than like the New Jerusalem or Adam on Diamond. They're more specific and there's more about them. And I think that's why I kind of just hold off on expressing what I think with regard to like the timing of the second coming, because I feel like it's soon. But it's difficult for me to like put a timeline on that. And while I am interested in timelines and I'm always intrigued by them, I always have reserves about them. And it's because I study the signs of the times so much that I can just see that there are certain prophecies that are very specific that prophets and apostles have been talking about for like 200 years, all the way up through the most recent apostles that we have in the 2000s. And so this is one of them. This is one of them, and it's a main one. And so if you're curious about the signs of the times, this is one that's worth studying. And I think if anyone's interested, I'd be happy to show you more. I'm already doing kind of like a Book of Revelation commentary, like collected commentary series of videos. And I feel like this will tie into that, and I'd love to do a deep dive on it. But for now, just go check out these scriptures that I've pointed out. Like right here in Zechariah, and we'll end with this. It says, "The burden of the word of the Lord for Israel, saith the Lord, which stretcheth forth the heavens, and layeth the foundation of the earth, and formeth the spirit of man within him. Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about, when they shall be in the siege, both against Judah and against Jerusalem. And in that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces, though all the people of the earth be gathered together against it." And this is, I think, starting to unfold on the world stage. And I do believe that this will build up into what it says here in the final great war. All nations will be engaged at Jerusalem. This is our gospel doctrine. And I think that it's just barely starting to get to a point where I can see how this could start to happen and unfold. It could take a decade, it could take a few decades, certainly, but it could also happen really quickly. I mean, there's like a matchbox effect happening there right now. So I think it's just something worth keeping an eye on. And I'll leave you with that. I think probably tonight. There was one other thing that I wanted to show you, and it was in the other lesson manual. It's this one right here. If you go to your seminary teacher manual and you look up lesson 130 for Isaiah 51, 17 through 23's commentary, it says, "Who were the two sons who fainted?" And this is that link to those two prophets. "For centuries, the covenant people of the Lord have drunk at the hand of the Lord the cup of his fury," or in other words, they reaped the results of their refusal to heed his word, and this wrung them out. And the days of judgments for Israel are not finished yet. In the battle of Armageddon, the Jewish nation will once again undergo great oppression and judgment. The text of 2 Nephi 8:19 through 20, and that's what we just looked at, taken from the brass plates, suggests that the two sons may be the two witnesses of Revelation 1 through 6, or 11, 1 through 6, who will keep the armies from defeating the Jews. And Doctrine and Covenants 77:15 talks about the two prophets. "By means of these two servants of God and the miracles they work, God will remove from Israel's hand the cup of trembling, even the dregs of the cup of my fury. The promise is, thou shalt no more drink it again. Instead, the cup of fury shall be given to those who have trampled on and walked over the covenant people of the Lord. It will then be their turn to know suffering." And I think this is starting to happen now. But these two prophets, there's just so much stuff, like so much stuff pertaining to them. Doctrine and Covenants 77:15 says what is to be understood by the two witnesses. So in here they're called witnesses. They are two prophets that are to be raised up to the Jewish nation in the last days at the time of the restoration, and to prophesy to the Jews after they are gathered and have built the city of Jerusalem in the land of their fathers. And anyway, I'm going to leave it there, food for thought, and then I'll try to follow up later with another video for the Revelation series.